Good evening, everyone, and welcome back as we continue to explore John's Gospel. Tonight we're going to take a look at John chapter 1, verses 6 through 18. This will be a little bit longer than last week. We got a bit more ground to cover. In this section and for much of the remaining chapter, we're going to be learning about John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus. So let's begin by looking at verses 6 through 9. John writes, "There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light, the true light, which gives light to everyone who is coming into the world." So here John's introducing John the Baptist. Other gospel writers, particularly Luke, devote more time to John the Baptist, but our author here is really continuing his focus on Jesus, so he's really only telling us that which is necessary to know about John the Baptist. He really doesn't want to take away from the central figure of the gospel. John, the writer, wants to focus on who sent John the Baptist and why. We can also note that John, the writer here, is making very clear that John the Baptist came to tell us of the coming light. But he wants there to be no confusion about who that light is. It is Jesus. I noticed the last sentence especially. John wants us to know that what is coming is the true light, and that it is for everyone. And that's really a central message of the Gospels. This is the good news. The light, the knowledge, and the salvation that Jesus offers is for everyone. And that's kind of another big monumental change. In the Old Testament, really in the Old Testament days, people of all lands would have considered their God to be somewhat of a regional God. You would see this in a lot of the old prophecy books and that kind of thing, especially Ezekiel, if those who were in our Ezekiel study can remember. The idea that gods and religion sort of had borders, but that is not the message that John or any of the other Gospels is telling us. Jesus, just like the sunlight, is for everyone, and that's pretty cool stuff. The sentence also uses a somewhat curious change of tense in the writing, and I think it's easily missed if you're not looking for it. Now, I would have missed it, and I've missed it every time I've read it before, but my commentary pointed it out. John writes of the light which gives, suggesting that it is still giving, which of course is exactly what we believe. But he also states that it was coming, which indicates a past tense, but also suggests an anticipation. As the reader, when I read this, I feel a sense that John is saying, hey, this really great thing is coming. It's not quite here yet, but here it comes, so get ready. The point being that the light, Christ, has always existed, but is about to be fully revealed in a way that humanity has never seen or understood before. And of course, that's true. Now let's continue on here and have a look at verses 10 through 13. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born, not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. The author of my commentary made a remark toward the end of his review of chapter 1, and in effect he was saying, in one chapter, John has preached more about the gospel than many churches preach in an entire year. And sadly, I think that might be true in some cases. Not in the church we go to, though, just in case pastor's watching. John really is packing in a lot of theology here, though. And you could almost read just chapter 1 of John and have every one of the main points found in Christian theology. Almost. And of course, I'd recommend you read it all. John finally describes Christ's coming. We see Christ coming into a world that was made through him, as we explored in verses 1 through 5, and a world that very much entirely owes its existence to him. The world will not understand him. Some will, and still do, reject him. But there is hope for those who believe, John writes. Sorry, I read that awkwardly. There is hope for those who believe. John writes, but to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. To those who believe will be granted the right to become children of God. And there's really something unique about the wording or calling it a right to become the children of God. Like any right, it cannot be taken away. A right is something given to us only by God. That means that no matter what anyone thinks of us, regardless of our upbringing, our social class, our wealth or poverty or color or mental acuity, we all have the same inherent right to be children of God. And the price is little more than belief and a willingness to follow God. That is the meaning of the good news. Now, I understand that rights, when we think of them in the traditional sense, can be oppressed, they can be deprived, they can be denied to people, and sadly, frequently are. But that doesn't mean they don't have the right. They still have the inherent right. And this right to be children of God is even more inherent, because even though people can be persecuted for their faith, they cannot take away that status as child of God to those who believe. No man or woman can take that away. And that's really special. So with that right comes the opportunity to be reborn, not of a flesh that can falter and fail, not dependent upon the act of two people, but rather to be born of God. John is telling the reader about a gift that cannot be taken away by any earthly means. That doesn't mean it can't be given away. It is dependent upon the receiver of the gift to accept that gift and to walk in that faith. And there is a whole debate about once saved, always saved, or can you lose your salvation? That's a big one. We're not going to get into it tonight. But now verses 14 through 18. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. This coming represents a monumental shift in the way people will understand their relationship with God. Up to this point, the thinking was traditionally that God would dwell in the tabernacle, and only certain people and for certain reasons could access or even approach God. But now, God in Jesus is the tabernacle incarnate. The grace and truth that John describes has come into the form of a human being. He will teach of a relationship with God that is only possible through this divine rebirth, one that, again, requires only the willingness to accept Christ and to follow him. In some ways, it's the cheapest price in the world, and in some ways, it could be considered the most expensive price in the world. And in some ways, this is why Jesus was rejected. He came to replace a system of convoluted rules, one that created a hierarchy that came with a power structure, and people who wanted to use that power structure to their own advantage. But John leaves us no middle ground here. He is clear that Jesus is the replacement for that system. Jesus is God incarnate. He has always been and always will be. And to some, this is a threat. That's all I've got for this week. Next week we'll continue to look more at John's first chapter, including the first episode of Jesus' first skeptics being sent to investigate his claims. Until then, please stay safe, and we will see you soon.